The day they read my father's will was supposed to be the final nail in my coffin. My half-siblings sat around that mahogany table in their designer suits, barely containing their smirks as the lawyer droned on about the distribution of Dad's estate. The mansion, my childhood home where I'd spent 35 years caring for him through his illness, was going to my stepmother Vivian and her 3 children. I wasn't even mentioned. Not until I noticed something odd about Dad's old family Bible sitting forgotten on the bookshelf. While they were busy dividing his fortune, I spotted the corner of a yellow document peeking out from between those well-worn pages. My heart nearly stopped when I realized what I was looking at. Dad hadn't forgotten me after all. In fact, he'd planned everything, right down to this moment when they thought they'd finally pushed me out of the picture for good. Growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, meant living by certain unspoken rules. Our family name, the Caldwells, carried weight, especially in local business circles where my father had built his real estate empire from nothing. But that was before Vivian came into our lives. Mom died when I was 15, breast cancer. Dad was devastated, lost in grief for nearly 2 years until he met Vivian at a charity gala. She was 20 years his junior, with 3 children from a previous marriage, Tyler, Madison, and Blake. I was a senior in high school when they married, in our garden, beneath the ancient oak trees draped with Spanish moss. "This is still your home, Rebecca," Dad assured me, his hand squeezing mine as we watched Vivian direct the movers rearranging Mom's antique furniture. "Nothing will change that." But everything changed. Overnight, I went from being Daddy's only girl to the awkward outsider. Vivian redecorated the mansion, erasing Mom's touches room by room. My childhood photos disappeared from the walls, replaced by professional portraits of her children. Even the traditional Sunday suppers turned into elaborate social events where I served as little more than background decoration. "Rebecca, darling," Vivian would say at these gatherings, her honey accent thickening for effect, "would you mind serving the sweet tea? You do it so much better than the help." This, while her own children lounged about like visiting royalty. The summer after my college graduation was particularly humiliating. Dad had organized a party to celebrate my degree in architecture. I'd worked hard, graduated with honors, and had secured an internship with a prestigious firm in Charleston. The mansion was filled with local bigwigs, potential clients, Dad's business partners, old family friends. "And what are your plans now, Rebecca?" asked Mr. Harrington, one of Dad's oldest friends. Before I could answer, Vivian interjected. "Oh, Rebecca's taking some time to find herself. Not everyone has Tyler's drive. Harvard Business School in the fall, you know." She patted my hand condescendingly. "Some birds just need a little longer to leave the nest." Dad frowned but said nothing. Later, I overheard Vivian telling him, "Charles, she's nearly 23. Don't you think it's time she found her own place? The children need more space." By the children, she meant hers. They had already claimed the east wing of the mansion, including my childhood bedroom, which Madison had converted into her meditation space. Despite the pressure, I stayed. Not because I couldn't afford to leave, but because Dad's health began to decline. Subtle things at first, forgetting appointments, misplacing keys. Then the diagnosis, early onset Alzheimer's. I couldn't abandon him to Vivian's care, so I took a job with a local firm and moved into the carriage house on the property. For 10 years, I watched Dad slip away while simultaneously fending off Vivian's attempts to isolate him from me. She'd forget to tell me about doctor appointments or family dinners. She'd tell him I was too busy to visit when I was literally yards away in the carriage house. But Dad always lit up when he saw me, even on his worst days. "My Becca," he'd say, reaching for my hand, "you look just like your mother." The one thing that never left Dad's side was his Bible, Mom's gift on their wedding day. He read it daily, even as other routines faded. Sometimes I'd find him in his study, staring at it, as if trying to remember something important. "Take care of this Bible when I'm gone," he told me during a rare lucid moment about a month before he died. "Everything that matters is in here." I nodded, assuming it was his faith giving him comfort. I had no idea he meant it literally. The day of the will reading dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect Charleston spring mornings that feels like a slap in the face when you're grieving. It had been 2 weeks since we buried Dad beneath the magnolias in the family plot, right beside Mom. I'd spent those weeks in a fog, barely eating, barely sleeping, while Vivian had been busy meeting with decorators and planning a massive renovation of the mansion. "It's time this old place got a refresh," I overheard her telling Madison over breakfast. "Charles was so sentimental about keeping things the way Elizabeth had them. Now we can finally bring it into this century." The attorney, Mr. Jennings, had scheduled the reading for 10 a.m. in Dad's study, a room that still smelled of his pipe tobacco and leather-bound books. I arrived early, running my fingers along the spines of his favorite novels, trying to feel closer to him one last time. Vivian and her children arrived as a unit, dressed in coordinated navy blue outfits that looked more appropriate for a business meeting than a will reading. "Rebecca," Vivian nodded curtly, "I hope you've started packing. We'll need the carriage house for the landscapers during the renovation." Tyler smirked. "Maybe we can help you find a nice apartment in West Ashley. It's becoming quite affordable." I bit my tongue. West Ashley was 40 minutes from downtown Charleston and worlds away from the historic district where our mansion stood. It was their way of saying I didn't belong in this part of town anymore. Mr. Jennings arrived, briefcase in hand, his face giving away nothing as he sat up at Dad's desk. We all took seats around the room, Vivian in Dad's chair, naturally, her children flanking her on the leather sofa, while I perched on a window seat near the bookshelf. "Before we begin," Mr. Jennings said, "I want to express my condolences. Charles was not just a client, but a friend for over 30 years. Vivian dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Thank you, Harold. This is such a difficult time for our family." I noticed Mr. Jennings' gaze flicker to me briefly before he opened his briefcase. Something in his expression made my stomach tighten. The reading began with standard legal preamble, but I could barely focus as anxiety built inside me. I hadn't expected much, perhaps some small keepsakes of Mom's that Vivian hadn't already repurposed. But the way Vivian's children kept exchanging glances told me they knew something I didn't. "As to the distribution of assets," Mr. Jennings continued, "the Caldwell family home at 42 Meeting Street, along with all furnishings and associated property, is bequeathed to Vivian Margaret Caldwell." Vivian's smile was small but triumphant. Madison squeezed her mother's hand. "The Caldwell business holdings, including all real estate development interests, commercial properties, and associated accounts, are to be divided as follows: 60% to Tyler Charles Preston, 20% to Madison Elizabeth Preston, and 20% to Blake William Preston." Blake, the youngest, actually pumped his fist. I felt sick. Furthermore, the sum of $5 million from the Charles Caldwell Trust is to be distributed equally among these 3 beneficiaries upon their 30th birthdays. The room was spinning now. Not only was I losing my home, but Dad had left his entire fortune, the business he'd built from nothing, the wealth he'd accumulated over a lifetime, to Vivian's children. Children who had barely spent time with him during his illness. Children who carried another man's name. "What about Rebecca?" Mr. Jennings asked, looking up from the document. Vivian waved a dismissive hand. "I'm sure Charles would want us to provide something for Rebecca, perhaps a small stipend until she gets established elsewhere." The condescension in her voice was the final straw. 10 years of caring for Dad, of watching these people slowly take everything from him while he was too ill to see it, all of it crashed down on me at once. "Is that it?" I asked Mr. Jennings directly, my voice steadier than I felt. "Dad left nothing for me?" Mr. Jennings looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I'm afraid the document I have here contains no specific provisions for you, Miss Caldwell. This is unusual, given my conversations with your father over the years, but this is the signed and witnessed will dated last year." Last year, when Dad could barely remember his own name some days, when Vivian had power of attorney. "How convenient," I muttered. "I beg your pardon?" Vivian's voice turned icy. "Nothing." I turned to stare out the window, blinking back tears, when something caught my eye. Dad's Bible, sitting on the bookshelf where it always had. The gold embossing of our family name glinted in the sunlight, streaming through the window. "Everything that matters is in here," Dad had said. As Mr. Jennings continued with minor bequests to longtime staff members, I casually moved toward the bookshelf and picked up the Bible. It felt heavier than I remembered. Opening it randomly, I flipped through the pages, and that's when I saw it. A corner of yellowed paper protruding from Psalms. Carefully, I eased it out just enough to see what it was. A deed. Not just any deed, but one for the mansion, dated just 6 months ago, with my name clearly visible. My heart hammered in my chest as I slid the document back into place and hugged the Bible to my chest. Mr. Jennings was wrapping up the reading, and Vivian's children were already discussing how to divide Dad's art collection. "Rebecca," Vivian's voice cut through my thoughts. "Harold asked if you have any questions." I looked at the family that had never been mine, at the woman who had systematically erased me from my father's life, and I made a decision. "Just one," I said quietly. "May I take Dad's Bible as a keepsake, since it seems that's all I'm entitled to?" Vivian looked relieved, probably afraid I'd make a scene. "Of course, dear. How appropriate." If only she knew what she had just given away. 3 days after the will reading, Vivian hosted what she called a celebration of Charles's legacy at the mansion. The guest list included Charleston's elite, judges, politicians, business leaders, people who could help Tyler, Madison, and Blake capitalize on their newly acquired wealth and status. I wasn't formally invited, but Mr. Jennings tipped me off about the event. "You might want to be there, Rebecca," he said cryptically over the phone. Sometimes these family gatherings reveal unexpected truths. I spent those 3 days meeting secretly with Mr. Jennings and a forensic accountant he trusted. The Bible had contained not just the deed, but a letter from Dad, written during a period of lucidity, detailing how Vivian had manipulated him into signing documents he didn't understand. There was also a USB drive with security footage from his study, footage showing Vivian and Tyler removing papers from his safe when Dad was hospitalized last year. The night of the party, I dressed carefully in a simple black dress that had belonged to my mother. I pinned her cameo brooch at my throat and slipped the deed and Dad's letter into my clutch. As I walked from the carriage house to the mansion, I could hear laughter and music drifting through the open windows. Crystal glasses clinked, southern drawls mingled with the string quartet Vivian had hired. I slipped in through the kitchen, nodding to Louisa, our longtime cook who had known me since childhood. "Miss Rebecca," she whispered, eyes wide, "they're saying all kinds of things about you to those people. That you abandoned your daddy when he got sick? That you're demanding money you ain't entitled to?" "It's all right, Louisa," I assured her. "Truth has a way of coming out." I entered the grand parlor just as Vivian was raising a toast. She faltered mid-sentence when she spotted me, but quickly recovered. "And here's Rebecca now," she trilled, gesturing broadly in my direction. "Charles's daughter from his first marriage. She's been staying in the carriage house, out of the goodness of Charles's heart, of course. Several guests looked uncomfortable. They knew me, had watched me grow up, had seen me at Dad's side during his illness. "Rebecca," Judge Hampton nodded at me kindly, "your father was a fine man. He spoke of you often." "Thank you," I said. "He was everything to me." "Well," Vivian interrupted, "we're just discussing the foundation we're establishing in Charles's name. Tyler will be heading it up with a focus on Alzheimer's research." "How fitting," I said, moving toward the center of the room. "Dad would have appreciated that. He always believed in remembering what's important." Madison rolled her eyes. "If you're here to make some sort of scene, Rebecca—" "I'm here," I cut in, "because this is my home. This has always been my home." The room quieted as I opened my clutch and removed the deed. "Mr. Jennings," I called out, spotting the attorney near the fireplace, "would you mind verifying the authenticity of this document for everyone?" He stepped forward, taking the paper from me. "This appears to be a deed to 42 Meeting Street, transferred to Rebecca Elizabeth Caldwell 6 months ago. It has Charles's signature, properly notarized by my office." Vivian's face drained of color. "That's impossible. Charles left everything to me in his will." "Actually," Mr. Jennings said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Charles transferred ownership of this property before his death. The will only covers assets he owned at time of death. He no longer owned this house." The murmuring grew louder as Vivian snatched the deed from Mr. Jennings's hands. "This is a forgery," she hissed. "Charles was not competent 6 months ago." "Interesting you should mention that," I said calmly, removing Dad's letter from my clutch. "Because Dad left this letter explaining exactly why he transferred the deed when he did. He was having a good week, his doctor confirmed it, and he wanted to make sure I was protected from exactly what you're trying to do." I turned to address the stunned guests. My father knew what was happening even when he seemed confused. He saw how his new family treated me, the daughter who stayed by his side while they were busy spending his money. So he made arrangements to protect what mattered most to him. Tyler stepped forward, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. "This is easily contested. A man with Alzheimer's was recorded on his own security system," I finished for him. "Footage that shows you and your mother removing documents from his safe last year while he was in the hospital. Footage I've already provided to the district attorney's office for review." The silence was deafening. Vivian's hand flew to her throat. "You're lying," she whispered. "Am I?" I looked around the room at the people who had known my family for generations. You all knew my father. You knew the kind of man he was. Do you really believe he would leave his only biological child nothing after I spent a decade caring for him? Or does it make more sense that these people, I gestured to Vivian and her children, took advantage of a sick man? Senator Beaumont, Dad's oldest friend, stepped forward. "I think we should give this family some privacy to sort through these revelations." As guests began making awkward exits, I turned to Vivian one last time. "You have until the end of the week to remove your belongings from my home. After that, I'm changing the locks." I walked out with my head high, Dad's Bible clutched to my chest, leaving behind the chaos of Vivian's sputtering denials and her children's panicked whispers. Outside on the veranda, I took a deep breath of jasmine-scented air and looked up at the stars. The same stars Dad and I used to identify together on clear Charleston nights. For the first time since his death, I felt him with me, and I knew I had done exactly what he wanted. The week that followed the party was nothing short of a hurricane tearing through Charleston society. By noon the next day, everyone in our social circle had heard about the confrontation. My phone rang constantly, old family friends offering support, Dad's business associates expressing shock at Vivian's deception, even Madison's fiancé calling to apologize for being caught in the middle of things. Vivian, predictably, refused to leave without a fight. A cease and desist letter arrived from her attorney, Whitmore and Blackwell, the second best firm in Charleston. Dad had always retained the best, Harrison and Palmer, who now represented me. "She doesn't have a leg to stand on," Julia Saul Palmer assured me over coffee in what was now officially my kitchen. "The deed is ironclad. Charles was evaluated by his neurologist the day before the transfer specifically to establish competency. We have the medical records." "What about the business holdings?" I asked. "The will giving everything to her children." "That's more complicated," Julia admitted, "but the security footage is damning. If they pressured Charles or misrepresented documents while he was impaired, we can challenge it. It will take time, though." I nodded, running my fingers over the Bible's worn leather cover. "Time I have. This house is what mattered most to Dad and to Mom." 3 days after the party, Mr. Jennings called with unexpected news. "Rebecca, I've found something you should see. Can you come to my office?" An hour later, I sat across from him as he pushed a file folder across his desk. Inside was a second will, dated 2 weeks before Dad died, during his last hospitalization. "He called me to his hospital room," Mr. Jennings explained, "said he needed to make changes while his mind was clear. The attending physician signed as witness, confirming his competency." My hands trembled as I read the document. This will left the business split evenly, 50% to me, 50% to be divided among Tyler, Madison, and Blake. The trust fund remained, but with a crucial addition. The money would only be distributed if they maintained a respectful and supportive relationship with Rebecca, as determined by her. "Why didn't you present this at the reading?" I asked, stunned. Mr. Jennings looked ashamed. "It was missing from my files until yesterday. My assistant found it misfiled under another client's name, a client whose legal work Tyler has been handling." The implications were clear. "He stole it," I whispered. "He took it from your office." "I can't prove that," Mr. Jennings said carefully, "but the timing is suspicious, and my assistant did mention Tyler was in the file room alone last month." Armed with both wills, the security footage, and Dad's letter, I had more than enough evidence for the district attorney to open an investigation into elder abuse and fraud. But I wasn't interested in vengeance, only justice. I had the locks changed on the mansion exactly 1 week after the party, just as I'd promised. When Vivian arrived that evening with a moving truck, expecting to take her most valuable possessions, including several antiques that had belonged to my mother, she found her key no longer worked. "You can't do this," she screamed through the door. "This is theft." I opened the door, but blocked the entrance. Actually, it's the opposite of theft. It's reclamation. But I'm not heartless. I handed her a list. "These are the items you brought into this house when you married Dad. You can take those, and only those, today." "This is absurd. The silver service alone was purchased by my great-grandmother in 1887. I finished for her. I have the documentation." By this point, a small crowd had gathered, neighbors pretending to walk their dogs, gardeners working suspiciously slowly. Charleston loved nothing more than drama among its oldest families. Tyler stepped forward, ever the pragmatist. "Mother, this isn't the place. Our attorney will handle this." "Your attorney will be busy with the DA's investigation," I replied calmly. "The one looking into how you manipulated a man with dementia into signing over his life's work." That silenced them. As they retreated to their cars, Madison lingered behind. "Rebecca," she said, her voice lacking its usual edge, "I didn't know. About the documents, I mean. Tyler and Mom handled all that." I studied her face, searching for sincerity. "But you knew Dad wasn't himself when decisions were being made." She looked down. I thought he wanted us to have everything. That's what Mom always said." "Did you ever just talk to him when he was lucid? Did you ever ask what he wanted?" Her silence was answer enough. "He would have provided for all of you," I said softly. "He was that kind of man. He just wanted to make sure I wasn't erased from my own family history. To my surprise, tears filled her eyes. I know, I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I thought you were amazing with him. During the bad times, I couldn't bear to see him that way. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. The legal battles dragged on for months, but the tide of public opinion had turned decisively in my favor. Charleston's old money circles closed ranks around me, partly out of loyalty to Dad's memory, partly because they were horrified at the idea that their own second spouses might try something similar. Eventually, we reached a settlement. The business would be divided according to Dad's final will, 50% to me, 50% split among the 3 siblings. The trust funds remained, but with trustees appointed to oversee distributions. And most importantly, Vivian would have no claim to the mansion or its contents. I hired a contractor to convert the carriage house into a guest cottage, then invited Louisa and her husband Henry, our longtime groundskeeper, to live there rent-free. They had been more family to me than Vivian ever was. 6 months after Dad's death, I found something else in his Bible, a folded note tucked into Proverbs. It was in his handwriting, dated during one of his last good weeks. My dearest Becca, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, either in body or in mind. Know that I was always proud of you. You are the best of me and your mother. The others wanted what I built, but you understood what really matters: home, family, love. I'm sorry for the pain Vivian caused you. I didn't see it clearly until it was too late, but I've made arrangements. You'll find what you need where you've always found comfort, in faith and in the words your mother loved. All my love, Dad. That night, I sat on the porch swing, the same one where Dad and I used to watch fireflies on summer evenings, and felt a sense of peace wash over me. The mansion was coming back to life. I'd removed Vivian's cold modernist touches and restored Mom's warm, traditional style. Family photos once again lined the hallway, including new ones of Dad in his last years, smiling despite his illness. Most surprisingly, Blake had reached out, asking if he could learn the real estate business from me. Tyler's going into politics, he explained, and Madison's moving to New York, but I actually want to build things, like your dad did. It wasn't the family I was born into, nor the one I would have chosen, but it was, perhaps, the beginning of something new, something honest, built on the solid foundation my father had always believed in. Looking back now, 2 years after that fateful day at the will reading, I realized that Dad's greatest gift wasn't the mansion or even his share of the business. It was the lesson he taught me through his final act, that family isn't always defined by blood or legal documents, but by the truth we hold in our hearts. The Bible sits on my desk now, a daily reminder of Dad's wisdom and foresight. Blake comes by twice a week to learn the business, and even Madison calls occasionally from New York. Vivian moved to Florida with Tyler, who lost his first political campaign after the scandal. Some things not even Charleston's selective memory can forgive. As for me, I've found peace in preserving not just the physical home my parents built, but their legacy of integrity. Sometimes the greatest triumph isn't in defeating those who wronged you, but in reclaiming what was always meant to be yours. If you've ever faced betrayal or been underestimated by those who should have supported you, I hope my story gives you courage. The truth has a way of revealing itself, even when hidden between the pages of an old book. Like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. And remember that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's written in a will, but what's written in your heart.